Welcome back to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Joe Thomas here with one of our favorite folks. He is the president of the Virginia Citizens Defense League, VCDL.org. It's been a bumpy couple of weeks, but we sort of expected this after the General Assembly started to give localities permission to come up with their own wacky-ass gun laws. Well, that's my words. But Philip Van Cleave is on the phone with us. Philip, welcome to the program this morning. First Charlottesville, then Fairfax. I guess they would have been 1 and 2 in the pool anyway. How are you doing this morning?
A little tired. Fairfax dragged on till 2 in the morning last night, and then they'd already made up their minds. They basically wanted to do this for 26 years. They said, so like little kids in a candy shop. They decided they'd go for the gusto.
Finally got permission. You know, Rob Bell is famous for saying elections have consequences, and I think we're living through that here. And I've asked some folks, and there's not a lot of hope this is getting rolled back anytime soon, because you really have to get that magical convergence of the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion. And even if the Republicans win the House and the governor's mansion, the Senate's still going to be in the way with any reforms to put the genie back in the bottle. Philip, how bad does it get?
Well, depending on elections, coming up in November, that may send a pretty strong signal to the General Assembly. And next year, if the House is won back, we might be able to get, say, permit holders exempted from all of this at the state level, and we might be able to sway enough in the Senate to go with that. To repeal the whole thing, probably 2023. Mm-hmm. If, as you suggest, the stars align, and they may well. I mean, people are fed up. This is what's going on in America and in Virginia. People have had it. This is nobody wants any of this stuff. So I think there's going to be retribution for for the tyranny that's going on in this state.
Famously, after and before, during the VCDL lobby day, which unfortunately seems like it was a half a decade ago, Philip, and that amazing rally, peaceful, not mostly peaceful, completely peaceful, at the Virginia Capitol. Of course, the number of sheriffs saying that we're going to be a sanctuary county, and so many. What is the likelihood that a lot of these ordinances are going to be strictly enforced? I've talked to people quietly, even in the city of Charlottesville, that the sheriff's office and the police department aren't necessarily going to be out looking for these people to cause trouble. It'll really just be if there's another, say, Unite the Right Antifa march and somebody has a rifle out, then they're going to have to, take the misdemeanor.
Right, I completely agree. I think your sampling matches what I've been hearing. Same thing. The police are not interested in enforcing this stuff against law-abiding citizens. There's no victim in this. If I forget and walk into a park carrying a concealed handgun, first of all, they're not going to know, and they're not going to be looking. And if they do find out, they're at worst they're going to ask me to say, "Oh, you can't have that here. Please leave." In which case I would leave, and not make a fuss. They don't want to do that. They're looking for criminals. They're in this looking for people that want to harm others. And so this is all really a pretty bad joke. But, it's there and we need to get rid of it. I think 95% of the state isn't going to do this. It's going to be very specific areas that we predicted, right after this passed. Charlottesville, Fairfax, Arlington, maybe Norfolk, who knows? But basically you could, the same people on the map that didn't really strongly oppose doing a Second Amendment sanctuary back in early this year or late last year. Go ahead.
Well, you bring up Norfolk, and if I recall correctly, and again, like I said, with so much that's been going on, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It seems like it was a half a decade ago, but didn't Norfolk have an opportunity and voted actually to become a sanctuary county, or is it one of the surrounding counties? Or there was some vote that happened before all this really got crazy, where even Norfolk, being the home of one of our shooting incidents here in Virginia, seemed to take the opposite approach.
It was Virginia Beach.
Oh, it was. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, not Norfolk. But Virginia, be right. Virginia Beach did. They became the sanctuary. Chesapeake's voting on their status. They're, our second biggest city or whatever. And they're voting on it. I think that they'll probably pass it coming up on September 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
And Newport News passed one. That's the only one so far that's passed anything like this down in that part of the state. And they exempted permit holders. In fact, I thought that was hilarious last night in Fairfax when the Moms Demand Tyranny were, speaking from talking points. They were all reading the same talking points. Mm-hmm. And one of them was, you need to do what Falls Church and Newport News did. So when I got up, I said, you could do what Newport News did and exempt permit holders. I said, I wonder why the moms are pushing Newport News, and I don't think I heard that name come up anymore after that.
Yeah.
So
give me the pencil.
Yeah, it's and they had it was like 4 or 5 to 1 last night. Not wanting this ordinance that spoke. They were they had like 10 or 15, but we probably had 60. Mm-hmm. And again, their minds were made up. One person down there, up there in Northern Virginia in Fairfax was good on this issue. He stood up, but he was the lone voice of reason.
This week, we saw the horrific shooting over the weekend in Los Angeles, and then we had a copycat in Suffolk here in Virginia without the real injurious after effects, but taking shots at police cars there. I asked, just as a consumer of the body politic, how can some of these Democrats that voted in lockstep with their party sit there and start saying, okay, well, what happened to what we were talking about in February isn't about going up and just shooting police officers sitting in their cars? Have they overplayed this, and are they going to lose the support of some of the folks who maybe on fiscal issues teeter to the center like a Chap Peterson?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There are, what you've got is the people that are pushing this narrative of, we need to ban guns everywhere, we need to disarm the police and all that. I think that part's taking over in the party, or has taken over. I think a lot of Democrats, in fact, I know many are rethinking their position on that. In other words, the party left them. They don't recognize who the party is anymore. This isn't what they're about. They believe in the police being empowered to do what they do to protect us. I think they're going to pay. I think it's amazing. It's like I'm really watching their party implode. The Democrats watching it just kind of implode.
Never mind, left the party didn't leave them. The party jumped into a Porsche Spider and drove off into the desert. But Philip, I want to go back to the ordinances. We mentioned Newport News, Charlottesville, Fairfax, and there's so many ambiguous parts of this that really puzzle me. Like, you can't carry the weapon from your home to a shooting range if you go past a park where an event is happening, or on a public street, or it seems almost like they wrote these laws in a focus group and just took cards and stuck them to a fence and said, all right, there's our legislation right there. And some of them just don't even seem to work within the parameters of each other.
No, they don't. In fact, I think you're right. Especially in Northern Virginia, they all got together and said, okay, here's our chance. Let's all unify and pass the same most restrictive thing we can. Let's all stand together on this. That's what they did. What's interesting, to show you how crazy this stuff is they passed, there's companies that make jewelry out of things like empty shell casings. Mm-hmm. If you're wearing that jewelry and you walk into one of these areas, you have a component of ammunition or a firearm. You could now be charged just for wearing a woman wearing a necklace or something that had a shell casing on it. Or a primer, or even just a bullet, just the part that comes out of the gun, just that part. That would be sufficient to get you charged under this, even if it's jewelry.
It's amazing.
You hit the nail on the head. This is a bunch of people that don't know anything about guns writing gun control. They don't know what they're doing.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm not that I'm trying to get them to come back to the TV cameras, but what I've thought was interesting in the light of these shootings, these grievous shootings, these attempted murders of police officers, I would have thought, given their verbosity regarding gun violence that the anti-gun crowd would be on TV 24/7 saying, see, we need to ban guns. But because they're shooting at police officers now, this isn't bannable violence. This isn't the violence they're against.
Yeah, well, we see that kind of thing all the time. But yeah, no, it's they don't seem to be standing up in defense of the police at all because they want to disarm the police. You have to understand. They want the old system that England's moving away from now, the body system, where police walk around with no guns and so forth. They'd be happy with that. They basically want to get rid of all guns, and they say they don't, but they're lying. You just look at their agenda. So yeah, the police getting shot, they don't see that as significant. You don't see them defending, saying, "Oh yeah, now we need to use that as an excuse to get rid of guns." Well, they're not friends of the police.
I don't say it as eloquently as Gandhi did, requoted by our mutual friend Tom Garrett, but I've always maintained that if mystically you could make every gun disappear like that, we would still find ways to do violence to one another. As a matter of fact, more acts of violence are taken against one another every day without firearms. And once you factor in the number of violent acts that are stopped by firearms, the percentages drop even further than that, Philip.
Yeah, there's a video that I put in an alert I thought was excellent. It was a guy being attacked by a crowd. They'd knocked him down. They were beating on him. A whole bunch of people, and more of them headed his way. I think he had like 5 or 6 on him. Well, he drew a gun, and boy, everything changed. That entire crowd just parted ways and moved out of the area. He didn't fire a shot, but he saved his life, and that shows the typical use of a firearm. It doesn't get shot every time. Very rarely does it need to be shot. And again, the other side doesn't like to acknowledge any of that. It's all evil to them. But a life was saved with it against a crowd. What other tool could you have that would have saved you? Would a taser? No, taser's only good on one person.
Right.
Would pepper spray? No. Some people don't get bothered by pepper spray, or it only temporarily disables them, or the bottle empties. And people aren't afraid of that. When they see a gun, that changed everything, and that's the only tool that would have done that and saved his life.
Well, heck, the way the General Assembly is going, you can't even use tear gas anymore. Well, unless you're, except for civilians may be able to use it, not police anymore.
Yeah.
Philip Van Cleave is on Freedom and Prosperity Radio this week, president of the Virginia Citizens Defense League. Philip, I have to ask you about this part of the Fairfax law, because it really was a head-scratcher for me. So the ordinance, as I read it, exempts ROTC, sworn law enforcement, educational county programs, and events at the Bull Run Public Shooting Center, and collegiate sports participants. Where did that come from? I mean, it just seems to stick out in like yellow highlighter pen on the top of the thumb. Why have we exempted collegiate sports participants from this?
I think they had to do that because I think that was in the enabling law. And I think that was just somebody lobbying from one of the universities or something, or colleges that had maybe a shooting team. I really don't know how it was something along that line, and they managed to lobby and get that in. Meanwhile, permit holders, we don't need to be able to carry. We had a lot of people testifying that their lives, that they'd either been assaulted sexually, one guy had saved a kid's life that was shot in his front yard, and he feared that the guys that shot him were going to come looking for him because they knew where he lived. It happened in his front yard. And again, the Board of Supervisors in Fairfax just sort of yawned at that.
And there are a lot of Board of Supervisors seats up for election in 2021 as well as the House of Delegates and the executive branch as well. And I've been talking about 2021 quite a bit over the last few weeks to try to inspire people to step forward and stand for these. It's one thing to say, I want to vote this bum out of office, but if there's no alternative, they're going to win by default anyway. Given the zeal and the crowd that was at the VCDL lobby day, the first, I think, is someone's got to be out there encouraging these folks to run for these offices, isn't it?
Yeah, and our political action committee is looking at doing that.
Oh, good.
Yeah, because I think that for some people, they may want to think of it as service to their country. I mean, we need to get some good people that really appreciate the Constitution in office. That's doing a huge service. You know, you got serving in the military, but doing this is another example of what I think would be great service back to your country, to be a person at local government level and at the state level as well, watching out for the Constitution and for our rights and putting this ship back on course.
Well, and that's the thing I've pointed out. I mean, I've applied 4 times for the Charlottesville Civilian Police Review Board, not because I think it's a good idea, but if they're going to have one, I'd like people that think like me to be on it, and try to inspire other people. School boards the same way.
Great. That's a great point. Yes, absolutely. If they're going to have it, then again, people need to step up that number one, understand a little bit about law enforcement. And you want people that you want legitimate people. You saw what they did with the Crime Commission, the Democrats.
Yep.
And not only did they strip off a lot of the Republicans, they put a gun control lobbyist, a person paid to push gun control, Lori Haas, they put her on the Crime Commission. That is, again, it's all mind-boggling. That makes no sense. They know what her vote's going to be, and of course, Bloomberg, I guess, gave them enough money to where they were willing to.
Well, and they have to do
hold
right
their
back.
nose and put her on the Crime Commission, something that's supposed to be an unbiased look at laws dealing with crime.
But if you or somebody from the NRA got put on or nominated for it, there would be 16 editorials running for a 2-week cycle in the Washington Post about how the lobbyists are trying to control the day in Virginia politics.
Exactly, and there's nothing. You could hear crickets chirping on this. They don't. They're
the
fine
hypocrisy.
with this.
That's the thing I'm trying to point out is this is just hypocritical because as the time goes on, we if we connect these dots, they are never for the things that they say that they're for, and that has to be made clear. And Philip Van Cleave, Virginia Citizens Defense League, one of the great clarion voices of this. One last point, Philip, and I know so many of your members are in law enforcement, and bless them for it, and I pray that they don't buy their time back, which I've been learning about, and folks getting early retirements and everything. But I mentioned this to Rob Bell. I grew up in New York City during the bankruptcy when everything was frozen. Nobody was getting hired. Everything was austerity. And for the next 10 years after the bankruptcy was cleared and the city was back in charge, they were trying to hire and bring in more police officers. You start to get into the Giuliani era and everything. But what you had was a gap of leadership. You went 10 years without hiring any police officers, so your senior police officers are all still relatively new to the profession of law enforcement, so field leadership was struggling and things like that. And I worry that Virginia as a state is existentially going into that with all these law enforcement officers leaving, even if in a couple of years we kind of push back and we put things back to where law enforcement should be, and we fix some of these problems. We go 4, 5, 6 years without any senior law enforcement, and the field operations are going to suffer.
Oh yeah. I mean, I keep hoping that law enforcement will hang in there. That they will. And I know it's not an easy thing to ask, but the really good law enforcement. We need these people, and we need them to hang in here. But they're doing everything they can to discourage it. And again, it's everything is whatever it is they want to do seems to be all coming together. Let's weaken or almost destroy the current police. Let's take away the right to defend yourself. It's all sort of falling together. It's not an accident. This isn't stuff that I don't think it's a coincidence. It's all part of somewhere they want to drag America to, and we had better all, Republicans out there and Democrats, better stand up and say we're not going there.
Well, it's property ownership, really. You see the folks in Portland with the megaphone saying, get out of your house, this is our neighborhood, a mob of people. If they have guns and you don't, they win. And if Lee Carter is successful and cuts the Virginia State Police by 25%, and you have the local police getting cut by that, if not more, it's just going to be the criminals with firearms anymore, Philip.
Yeah, and of course the elite figures that they'll have their own private security, so it doesn't really, that won't affect them and their family. Oh no, believe me, that's how they think. The rest of us, we can all pound sand, and that's the way it is. And we basically, elections do have consequences, and we had best start electing and getting some good people in there to save the country, because the barbarians are at the gates.
Well, and I know we try to, not be too political on this, and we're not talking about specific candidates, but we can't have 30%, 40% voter turnouts anymore, Philip. When 50, and I hear from people at gun shows saying, "Oh, I don't really vote all that much in local elections," and these are folks who are at gun shows buying firearms. These are the folks that need to be at the ballot boxes voting.
Yeah, there are at least there are more people trying to register voters at gun shows and stuff now.
Good.
And and they believe me, gun owners need. Boy, if you're a gun owner and you're not voting or you're not registered, I don't know what planet you're on, but you best be voting in every election, local, federal, state, and every time. It's nothing to ask for you to do that. Again, the other side wants everybody to throw their hands up and say, "Oh, there's no point. This is a lost cause." That's what they want you to do,
right? Because
they know that if you don't do that, things could change dramatically. There are over 2.5 million gun owners in the state with 8.5 million people. If all those gun owners vote, that's a pretty much unstoppable block of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at the last governor's races and you'll see. Philip, thank you so much. Do you have anything coming up with VCDL in the next few weeks that people can participate in, or just get online to vcdl.org?
Go to vcdl.org. We got our calendar up there. COVID's kind of slowed a lot of things down, but gun shows are coming back. Yep. And I know I'm speaking at various things around the state.
Yep, and the gun ranges are coming back. And
yes, oh yeah.
Well, that's always the best part of it. Well, you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, as always, for your visits and your efforts. And, who would have thought it could just happen in a blink of an eye the way it seems like it's happening. But, we can put it back just as quickly as well. Thank you, sir. You have a great weekend.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for tuning in. For all of us here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, my name is Joe Thomas. So long, and thanks for all the fish.